The planet had no name. In official coalition records, it was simply called Target Black 7. The soldiers who had died trying to reach it called it other things. The furnace, the grave, hell's doorstep. None of the names were kind. From orbit, the planet looked like a ball of dried blood. Red and brown and black mixed together across its surface. Volcanoes broke through the crust like wounds that would not heal. Rivers of lava cut bright orange lines through the darkness. No plants grew here. No animals lived here. Nothing survived. On this world, except the enemy base buried deep in its largest mountain. The shuttle approached in silence, its stealth systems hiding it from enemy sensors. Inside, the team made their final preparations. Kethvorin checked his weapons for the 20th time. His primary rifle was Coalition standard issue, reliable but not impressive. His secondary weapon was a blade that had belonged to his father and his father's father before that. The blade had killed many enemies over the generations. He hoped it would kill many more today. Sol sat in his chair with his eyes closed. He was reaching out with his mind, testing the mental connections between the team members. When they entered the mountain, they would not be able to use their radios. The electromagnetic fields would block all signals. Soulless telepathy would be their only way to communicate. 17 was loading explosives into every pocket and pouch on his crystalline body. He moved with a care that seemed strange for someone made of living glass. Each explosive was placed just so. Each detonator was checked twice. 17 treated his bombs the way artists treated their paintings. And Vasquez was reading. Kethvorin stared at her in disbelief. "What are you doing?" "Reading the mission briefing again." She did not look up from her tablet. "Third time through. I want to make sure I have not missed anything. We are about to enter a volcano filled with enemy soldiers. We have no extraction plan. We will probably die." "And you are reading?" "Yes. Is there something else I should be doing?" Kethvorin's mandibles clicked rapidly. He had no answer for this. The shuttle began its descent. The temperature inside the cabin started to rise as they entered the planet's atmosphere. Warning lights flickered on the walls. The pilot, a nervous Torvian named Kasht, spoke over the intercom. "Approaching drop zone, 2 minutes to insertion. Thermal levels are at 89% of suit tolerance. Good luck down there." 89%, Vasquez repeated softly. "That gives us about 6 hours before our suits fail." "The mission timeline calls for 4 hours, Kethvorin reminded her. "Good. We will have 2 hours of extra time if something goes wrong." "When something goes wrong," Soleth corrected. He had opened his eyes and was looking at Vasquez with a mixture of fear and fascination. "I have been monitoring your mind since we launched. You are not hoping things go right. You are expecting them to go wrong. You are looking forward to it." "Problems are interesting," Vasquez said simply. "The harder the problem, the more interesting it is." The shuttle touched down on a flat rock near the base of the mountain. The doors opened and heat flooded into the cabin like a living thing. Even through his environmental suit, Kethvorin could feel it pressing against his shell. The air outside was thick with ash and the smell of sulfur. The team moved quickly. They had rehearsed this part many times. Within 30 seconds, they were off the shuttle and moving toward the mountain. Within 60 seconds, the shuttle was gone, lifting back into the red sky and disappearing into the clouds. There would be no rescue now, no retreat. They were committed. The entrance to the thermal vents was exactly where the intelligence report said it would be. A hole in the rock, 3 meters wide, leading down into darkness. Hot air rose from the hole like breath from a sleeping dragon. "Temperature inside is 120% of suit tolerance," 17 reported. "We will need to move quickly between cool zones." "I have mapped the route," Vasquez said. She activated a holographic display on her wrist, showing a 3-dimensional image of the vent system. We go down for 200 meters, then move sideways through the secondary channels. There are thermal rest points every 50 meters where the temperature drops. We can survive in the hot zones for no more than 4 minutes at a time. Cathvoren studied the map. How did you know to look for thermal rest points? They were not in the official briefing. I asked 17 about volcanic geology. He explained how heat moves through rock. The rest points are where cooler air from the surface mixes with the hot air from below. Vasquez began attaching her rope to an anchor point. Ready when you are, Sergeant. The descent was a nightmare. Cathvoren had fought in many terrible places during his career. He had crawled through swamps that burned his skin. He had marched across deserts that froze at night. He had survived environments that would have killed most beings. But the thermal vents were something else entirely. The heat was constant and crushing. It pressed against his suit from all directions, trying to cook him inside his own armor. His breathing system worked at maximum power, cooling the air before it reached his lungs. Warning lights flashed on his helmet display. Temperature critical. Suit integrity falling. Heat exposure limit approaching, and still they went down. Vasquez led the way, moving with a speed and confidence that seemed impossible. She found handholds in the rock that Cathvoren could not see. She spotted safe paths through the steam and smoke. She counted seconds out loud, timing their movements between rest points with perfect precision. 30 seconds, she called out. Keep moving. Cathvoren's legs burned. His arms ached. His shell was starting to crack in places where the heat was strongest. Behind him, he could hear Soleth gasping for breath. The Meldrani were not built for this kind of punishment. 20 seconds, almost there. 17 was having the worst time of all. The heat affected his crystalline body in strange ways. Twice, pieces of him had simply broken off when they became too hot. He had snapped them away and kept moving, trusting his species' ability to regrow lost parts. But each break slowed him down. Each break cost him energy. 10 seconds. Push through. The rest point appeared ahead of them like an oasis in a desert. A small cave where cooler air collected. They tumbled into it one by one, gasping and shaking. Cathvoren's suit reported that he had been 4 seconds away from complete heat failure. Everyone alive? Vasquez asked. She was already checking her equipment, already looking at the map for the next stage of the descent. Barely, Soleth wheezed. Good enough, Vasquez pointed down the cave. We rest for 3 minutes, then we move again. The enemy base is still 150 meters below us. Cathvoren pulled himself up against the cave wall. His entire body screamed for rest, for water, for escape. But he pushed those feelings aside. He was a soldier. He had survived worse than this. No, that was a lie. He had never survived anything this bad. Private Vasquez, he said between breaths, I need to ask you something. Yes, Sergeant? Are you afraid? Vasquez considered the question for a moment. Her face was red from the heat, and sweat dripped from her hair, but her eyes were clear and focused. Yes, she admitted. I am afraid. My heart is beating very fast. My hands want to shake. My brain is telling me to run away. Then why do you look so calm? Because fear is just information. It tells me that the situation is dangerous. It does not tell me what to do about it. She stood up and checked her rope. Humans learned a long time ago that fear is not the boss. We are the boss. We tell fear what to do, not the other way around. She started walking toward the next descent point. After a moment, the rest of the team followed. They had no choice. The only way out was through, and somewhere below them in the darkness and the heat, the enemy waited. Sergeant Cathvoren had seen many strange things in his 30 years of military service. He had fought in wars across 12 star systems. He had watched soldiers die and soldiers survive against all odds. He had trained recruits from over 40 different species. But nothing had prepared him for humans. The orientation chamber was cold and gray, like all military rooms in the Galactic Coalition. 23 new recruits stood in neat rows, their different bodies making a strange picture. Some were tall and covered in hard shells. Some were small and glowed with soft light. Some had too many arms or too many eyes or no eyes at all. And at the back, standing alone, was the human. Private Elena Vasquez did not look special. She was of average height for her species. Her dark hair was pulled back tight against her head in a military style. Her face showed no emotion. She simply stood and watched and waited. Kethvorn found this deeply unsettling. His 4 mandibles clicked together as he began the briefing. The sound echoed in the chamber like bones breaking. "You have been assigned to contested Zone Theta 9, he announced. His voice was harsh, but the translator implant in his throat turned it into flat, emotionless standard speech. The enemy has dug into the canyon network. They have been there for 3 years. Many soldiers have tried to remove them. Many soldiers have failed. He touched a button on his wrist, and the air in front of him came alive with light. A holographic image appeared, showing a planet that looked like a wound in space. Red canyons cut across brown land. Clouds of yellow and green swirled in the atmosphere. The conditions are not friendly, Kethvorn continued. The fog in the canyons is acidic. It will eat through standard armor in 6 hours. The electromagnetic fields will make your communications fail at random. And the local animals are large, hungry, and not afraid of soldiers. The recruits shifted nervously. A Torvian in the front row made a small sound of worry. The Torvians were large beings with shells like insects, and they were known for their courage. If a Torvian was worried, the situation was bad. Kethvorn touched another button. New images appeared in the holographic display. Numbers. Red numbers. The recruits knew what red numbers meant. "These are your survival calculations," the sergeant said. "Based on your species, your training, and the mission parameters." He pointed at the Torvians. "For your kind, survival probability is 34%. He pointed at the small, pale beings called Meldrani. They were empaths who could feel the emotions of others. "For your kind, 28%. He pointed at the crystalline beings called Shuvith. They looked like statues made of living glass. "For your kind, 19%. The acid is very dangerous to your bodies." One by one, he went through each species. The numbers were all low. The highest was 41%, for a species that could survive in almost any environment. The recruits grew more and more quiet. Finally, Kethvorn turned to the back of the room. "To the human. And for you, Private Vasquez," he said, pulling up her file. New numbers appeared in the holographic display. Survival probability, 7.2%. The room went completely silent. Even the Torvians stopped moving. The Shuvith, who usually showed no emotion at all, seemed to lean back slightly. 7.2%. That was almost nothing. That was death with extra steps. Kethvorn watched the human carefully. He expected fear. He expected anger. He expected her to demand a transfer, or to cry, or to freeze up like prey animals do when they know they cannot escape. Private Vasquez raised her hand. "Yes?" Kethvorn asked. "That's 7.2%, Sergeant," she said. Her voice was calm, pleasant even, like she was asking about the weather. "Is that calculated with standard equipment, or does it account for modifications?" Kethvorn's mandibles stopped moving. This was not the question he had expected. "Standard equipment," he answered slowly. "No modifications. Everyone gets the same gear." "I see." Vasquez nodded. She seemed to think about this for a moment. Then she did something that made Kethvorn's blood run cold. She smiled. "Is there a hotter posting available?" She asked, thought the words hung in the air like poison gas. Cathvoren felt his secondary hearts begin to beat faster. He must have heard wrong. His translator must have broken. There was no other explanation. "I am sorry," he said. "I believe there was a translation error." "You asked for a harder posting," Vasquez repeated. Her smile had not changed. "If one is available." Theta 9 sounds like standard trench warfare. Dig in, hold position, slow fighting over months or years. "Respectfully, Sergeant, that is not really where humans do their best work." Cathvoren stared at her. In his long career, he had served alongside 3 humans. He remembered each of them clearly. The first human had carried a wounded Maldrani for 16 hours through a swamp that dissolved flesh on contact. When asked how she survived, she had shrugged and said, "I was angry." The second human had refused all pain medication after losing an arm, so that she could stay awake and provide covering fire while her team escaped. She had killed 37 enemy soldiers with 1 arm and no pain relief. The third human had died holding a single corridor against 40 enemy soldiers. When they finally reached his body, they found that he had taken 37 of them with him. He had written a message on the wall in his own blood. It said, "Not today." Cathvoren had hoped that Private Vasquez would be different. More normal. More sensible. He had been foolish to hope. "There is," he said, speaking carefully, "Operation Blackthorn." He changed the holographic display. A new planet appeared. This one looked even worse than Theta 9. It was a world of fire and darkness. Volcanoes split the ground. No light reached the surface. And buried deep in a mountain of black rock, hidden from all sensors, was an enemy research base. "Small team mission," Cathvoren explained. 4 soldiers only. The objective is to enter the base, steal information about a new weapon, and escape. The weapon is biological. It could kill billions if released. He paused. The next words were hard to say. Survival probability for all known species is listed as incalculable. This is because no one has ever come back to tell us what happened. Command considers it a one-way mission. Death is expected. Private Vasquez studied the holographic display. Her eyes moved across the details of the planet, the base, the volcanic terrain. Her expression was the same one that Cathvoren's young children wore when he gave them puzzle games. "How do we get in?" she asked. "Through the thermal vents, the passages that release heat from under the ground." "And how do we get out?" "There is no extraction plan. Command does not expect anyone to survive." "Who else is on the team?" Cathvoren made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a cry of despair. "Whoever is foolish enough to volunteer." Private Elena Vasquez straightened her body to full attention. Her shoulders went back. Her chin lifted. Her eyes locked onto Cathvoren's eyes, and they did not look away. "I volunteer, Sergeant." In the back of the orientation chamber, one of the Torvian recruits fell to the ground. He had fainted from shock. No one moved to help him. They were all too busy staring at the human who had just asked for death and smiled. While doing it, Cathvoren's mandibles clicked slowly. He had seen many strange things in 30 years of service, but he had never seen anything quite like this. The news of the human's request spread through the military base like fire through dry grass. By the end of that first day, everyone had heard the story. A human with a 7.2% survival chance had asked for something harder. A human had volunteered for a mission that was considered certain death. A human had smiled while doing it. Cathvoren sat alone in his quarters that night, staring at the wall. His report to command was simple and direct. 1 volunteer for Operation Blackthorn. Human female. Private Elena Vasquez. But the report did not capture what he had seen in that orientation chamber. It did not capture the absolute calm in her voice. It did not capture the way she had looked at death and found it interesting. 3 days passed. 3 days of preparation, planning, and psychological evaluations. The military doctors examined Vasquez for signs of mental illness. They found nothing wrong with her. She was perfectly sane. She was simply human. Her brain chemistry is fascinating, Dr. Melleth reported. She was Meldrani, small and pale, with the ability to sense emotions. When I showed her images of the mission site, her fear response activated normally. But then another chemical flooded her system. We call it thrill response in humans. It is connected to their survival instincts. She is thrilled by the idea of dying? Kethvoren asked. No, she is thrilled by the idea of the challenge. To humans, danger and excitement use the same pathways in the brain. What terrifies us makes them feel alive. Kethvoren remembered this conversation as he boarded the stealth shuttle 3 days later. He had not volunteered for this mission. He had not even been asked. Command had simply assigned him as the team's veteran specialist. 30 years of experience, they said. Expert knowledge of enemy tactics, they said. History of managing unpredictable assets, they said. They meant the human. The shuttle was small and cramped, designed more for stealth than comfort. 4 seats faced each other in the main cabin. Kethvoren took the seat closest to the door, an old habit from years of combat. Across from him sat Private Vasquez, already busy with her rifle. She was taking it apart and putting it back together. Again and again. Her hands moved without thinking, following patterns they had learned long ago. Click, slide, snap, click, slide, snap. The rhythm was almost peaceful. You have done that 4 times since we launched, Kethvoren observed. Helps me think. Vasquez replied without looking up. What are you thinking about? Entry angles. Thermal variance. How long we can survive in the heat vents before our suits fail. She paused, considered something, then continued. Also wondering what they serve for dinner on this ship. Kethvoren's mandibles clicked in confusion. You are thinking about food? Humans work better when we are not hungry. Basic biology. The third member of their team entered the cabin. His name was Soleth, and he was a Moldrani empath, like Dr. Melleth. But where the doctor was soft and calm, Soleth was sharp and nervous. His job was communication and coordination. He could link minds together, allowing the team to share thoughts in battle. He sat down next to Kethvoren and immediately pressed his fingers against his temples. Your thoughts are very loud, he said to Vasquez. His voice was strained. I have worked with many species over many years. I have never felt a mind so comfortable with its own death. Vasquez looked up from her rifle for the first time. Not death, she corrected him. Difficulty. There is a difference. Please explain this difference. Death is an ending. It happens once and then it is over. Difficulty is different. Difficulty is something you can push against. Something you can solve. She snapped a piece of the rifle back into place. Humans do not look at low survival odds the way other species do. We look at them and think, how can I change these numbers? Soleth's fingers pressed harder against his temples. That is deeply irrational. Yes, it is. But it works. The fourth and final member of the team came up from the cargo hold. His name was long and complicated, as all Shuvith names were. It translated roughly to crystalline note of 17 fractures. The team called him 17 for short. 17 was made of living crystal, like all members of his species. He stood 7 feet tall, and his body caught the light in ways that made him look like a sculpture in a museum. But there was nothing artistic about his profession. 17 was a demolitions expert. He knew more ways to make things explode than most beings knew words. I have completed my inventory, 17 announced. His voice was like wind chimes in a storm. "We have sufficient explosives to destroy a small city. The human has requested modifications to our standard protocols." Kethvorin turned to Vasquez. "What kind of modifications?" "I asked him to reduce the safety margins by 40%. You want less safety on the explosives? More power, tighter placement. We are going into a mountain full of enemies with no extraction plan. We are going to need every advantage we can get." Soleth groaned and rubbed his temples harder. "This is why the Coalition has a human exception clause in all combat doctrines." Vasquez tilted her head. "A what?" "The human exception clause," Kethvorin recited from memory. He had been forced to memorize it during his officer training. Standard military tactics are to be ignored when operating alongside human soldiers. Human tactical instincts follow principles that remain impossible for allied species to understand, but have proven highly effective in combat situations. Huh. Vasquez seemed surprised by this. Pleased, even. "That is actually kind of nice." "It is not meant as a compliment," Soleth muttered. "It is a warning." Vasquez shrugged and went back to her rifle. Click. Slide. Snap. The shuttle flew on through the darkness of space. Stars passed by the windows like cold white eyes. Somewhere ahead of them, a planet of fire and shadow waited. A mountain full of secrets. A weapon that could kill billions. Kethvorin watched the human work on her rifle and tried to understand what he was seeing. She did not act like someone going to die. She did not act like someone who was afraid. She acted like someone going to work. Like this was just another job. Just another problem to solve. "Private Vasquez," he said finally. "May I ask you a question?" "Of course, Sergeant. Why did you join the military?" Vasquez was quiet for a long moment. Her hands stopped moving. She looked up at Kethvorin, and for the first time he saw something in her eyes besides calm calculation. He saw fire. "On Earth," she said slowly, "there is a type of animal called a salmon. Small fish. Not dangerous. Not special. Every year these fish swim up rivers to lay their eggs. The rivers have waterfalls. The waterfalls are high and the water is fast, and most of the fish die trying to climb them. That sounds inefficient. It is. It is. But the salmon do not stop. They throw themselves at the waterfalls again and again. They die in huge numbers. And every year, enough of them make it through to keep the species alive." Vasquez paused. "Humans are like that. We are not the strongest species. We are not the fastest. We do not have shells or claws or poison. But we do not stop. We throw ourselves at problems until they break or we do. And if you break, then someone else will try after me. That is how we have always worked. That is how we conquered our world. That is how we reached the stars." She lifted her rifle, fully assembled now, and checked the sights. "I joined the military because there are problems out there that need solving. And I am very good at not stopping." The shuttle flew on. The stars watched. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Kethvorin began to understand why humans were so dangerous. That it was not because they were strong. It was not because they were smart. It was because they genuinely, truly, completely did not know how to give up. He wondered if that made them brave or insane. He suspected it was both. The enemy base was not what they expected. Kethvorin had studied Wreath construction for 30 years. He knew their building styles, their defensive patterns, their love of sharp angles and dark metals. The Wreath built their bases like fortresses, with thick walls and narrow corridors designed to slow any attack. This base was different. This base was alive. The walls pulsed with a soft, sickly light. Organic tubes ran along the ceiling like blood vessels. The floor was soft in places, giving slightly under their feet like skin. The air smelled of chemicals and decay and something else. Something that made Kethvoran's survival instincts scream warnings. "What is this place?" Soleth whispered. His mental voice touched all of them, since speaking out loud was too dangerous. "I have never felt anything like it. The walls are thinking. Slowly, but they are thinking." "Biological research facility," Vasquez replied through the mental link. Her thoughts were sharp and clear, like her spoken words. "They are not just studying the weapon here. They are growing it." The team moved through the organic corridors in single file. Vasquez led, her rifle ready. Kethvoran followed close behind, watching for any sign of enemy movement. Soleth came next, his mind stretched out like invisible fingers, sensing for danger. 17 brought up the rear, his crystalline body carrying enough explosives to level the entire mountain. They had entered the base through a ventilation shaft that connected to the thermal vents. The shaft had not been guarded. The Vreth had never expected anyone to survive the descent. They had trusted the planet to kill any invaders. They had not counted on a human. "Contact ahead," Soleth warned. 3 Vreth, guard rotation. Vasquez held up her fist, and the team stopped moving. She pressed herself against the pulsing wall and looked around the corner. 3 Vreth soldiers stood in the corridor ahead, talking in their harsh, clicking language. They were tall and thin, with bodies like insects and faces like nightmares. Each one carried a weapon that could cut through armor like paper. "We cannot fight them," Kethvoran thought. "The noise will alert the entire base. We do not need to fight them." Vasquez studied the corridor, her eyes moving across walls and ceiling and floor. 17, can you create a distraction? Something small. Something that will make them investigate without raising an alarm. I can release a thermal charge in the shaft we came from. The temperature spike will trigger their sensors. They will think the vents are overheating. Do it. 30 seconds later, the 3 Vreth guards rushed past them, heading toward the thermal vents to investigate the alert. The team slipped through the corridor and continued deeper into the base. This pattern repeated itself again and again. Every time they encountered enemies, Vasquez found a way around them. She used distractions and timing and an understanding of enemy behavior that seemed almost supernatural. She knew where the guards would look and when they would look there. She knew which corridors were watched and which were ignored. "How do you do this?" Soleth asked after the 5th successful evasion. "I can sense your mind, but I cannot understand how it works. You are seeing patterns that I cannot see." "Humans are predators," Vasquez replied. "Our ancestors hunted animals that were faster and stronger than us. We could not catch them by running. We could not kill them by force. So we learned to watch, to wait, to understand." She paused at another corner, checking for threats. Every enemy makes patterns. Every guard gets comfortable. Every system has gaps. You just have to look long enough to see them. They reached the central chamber after 2 hours of careful movement. The chamber was the heart of the base, a massive open space carved out of the living rock. And in the center of that space, suspended in a field of glowing energy, was the weapon. Kethvoran felt his heart stop when he saw it. The weapon was not a bomb or a missile or anything he recognized. It was a creature, a thing of flesh and tendrils and too many mouths. It floated in its containment field like a dream of death, pulsing slowly with each breath. It was the size of a small ship. It was the ugliest thing Kethvoran had ever seen. "Biological weapon confirmed," Vasquez said through the mental link. Her voice was steady, but Kethvoran could feel a tremor beneath the surface. Even she was disturbed by what she saw. 17. Can you destroy it? The crystalline demolitions expert studied the creature with his faceted eyes. No, I do not have enough explosives. To destroy something that size, I would need to collapse the entire mountain. What about the geothermal tap? Kethvorin asked. He pointed to the far side of the chamber, where massive machinery connected to the volcanic systems below. If we rupture that, the eruption would consume everything. Including us, Soleth added. Including us. The team stood in silence, watching the weapon pulse in its containment field. They had found what they came for. They had discovered the enemy's secret. But destroying it would mean their own deaths. There might be another way, Vasquez said finally. Everyone turned to look at her. Her eyes were not on the weapon. They were on a console near the containment field. A communications console. The weapon is biological, she continued. That means it has a genetic structure. A code. If we can transmit that code to Coalition Command, they can develop a defense. A cure. Something that makes the weapon useless. She looked at each of her teammates in turn. We do not need to destroy it. We just need to make sure that it cannot work. And then we escape how? Soleth asked. I am working on that. Kethvorin felt a strange sensation in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize it. Hope. Against all logic, against all evidence, he felt hope. Because he had seen what this human could do. He had watched her solve problems that seemed impossible. If anyone could find a way out of this hell, it was her. What do you need? He asked. Time. Access to that console. And for someone to watch my back while I work. You will have it. Vasquez nodded once and moved toward the console. Kethvorin and 17 took up defensive positions, watching the entrances to the chamber. Soleth closed his eyes and stretched his mental awareness as far as it could go, monitoring for any sign of enemy approach. The human sat down at the console and began to work. Her fingers moved across the controls with a speed that seemed impossible. Data scrolled across the screen. Files opened and closed. Security systems were bypassed one after another. 5 minutes, she said out loud. I need 5 minutes to crack their encryption and transmit the data. You have 3, Soleth warned. Guard patrol approaching from the north corridor. Then I will work faster. Kethvorin watched the human work. Her face was calm, focused, completely absorbed in the task. The weapon floated behind her, pulsing with deadly potential. The enemy approached from the darkness. And Private Elena Vasquez typed and typed and typed, racing against death itself. 2 minutes, Soleth reported. They are getting closer. Almost there. 1 minute. They are entering the chamber. Vasquez hit one final key. The console beeped. A message appeared on the screen. Transmission complete. Got it, she said. Then she drew her rifle and turned to face the enemy. Now, we survived the hard part. The Vreth poured into the chamber like water through a broken dam. Dozens of them. Hundreds. More than Kethvorin could count. They had been discovered. They were surrounded. And there was nowhere left to run, but Private Elena Vasquez was smiling again. 17, she said. How do you feel about making a really big bang? The first wave of Vreth soldiers died before they knew what was happening. 17 had placed explosive charges around the chamber during their reconnaissance. Small charges. Hidden charges. Charges that nobody would notice until they went off. When Vasquez gave the signal, he triggered them all at once. The explosions were not large enough to damage the structure. They were precisely calculated to do something much more useful. They collapsed the 2 main entrances to the chamber, burying dozens of Vreth under tons of falling rock. The enemy advance stopped instantly. That will hold them for maybe 10 minutes, 17 reported. They will dig through eventually. 10 minutes is enough, Vasquez said. She was already moving toward the geothermal machinery at the far side of the chamber. Sergeant, I need you to tell me everything you know about Vreth engineering. Specifically, how their thermal systems work. Kethvorin followed her, his mind racing. The geothermal tap draws energy from the volcanic systems below. It powers the entire base. If we destroy it, the pressure will have nowhere to go. And what happens then? The mountain erupts. Everything within 12 kilometers is destroyed, including the weapon, including everything, including us. Vasquez reached the machinery and began to study it. Her eyes moved across pipes and valves and control panels, taking in information faster than Kethvorin could follow. He could almost see her mind working, processing data, looking for patterns. The tap cycles, she said suddenly. Every 18 minutes, pressure is released through auxiliary vents. Where do those vents lead? To the surface. But the pressure is intense. Anything inside those vents during a release would be crushed, or burned, or both. What if something was launched at exactly the right moment? What if something was positioned perfectly to ride the pressure wave instead of fighting it? Kethvorin's mandibles stopped moving. He understood what she was suggesting, and it was insane. You want to use the volcanic pressure to shoot us out of the mountain. I want to use physics to solve our problem. Vasquez turned to face the team. Her face was covered in sweat and ash. Her eyes were bright with something that might have been madness or might have been genius. The survival probability for this mission was listed as incalculable. Do you know what incalculable means? It means no one knows the odds, Solette said. It means no one has been crazy enough to try. Vasquez smiled that smile again, the one that made Kethvorin's blood run cold and his heart beat faster at the same time. We have 17 minutes until the next pressure release. 17. I need you to build shaped charges that can launch us into the vent system at precisely the right angle. Soleth, I need you to calculate the timing down to the fraction of a second. Sergeant, I need the exact layout of every auxiliary vent in this mountain. This will not work, Soleth said. His mental voice was strained, overwhelmed by the impossibility of what Vasquez was proposing. The variables are too many. The margins are too small. One mistake and we die. We are already dead, Vasquez replied. The only question is whether we take the weapon with us or give ourselves a chance to keep fighting. She looked at each of them in turn. Kethvorin, Soleth, 17. I am not asking you to believe this will work. I am asking you to try. The sound of digging came from the collapsed entrances. The Vreth were breaking through. They had minutes at most before the chamber was overrun. I will calculate the timing, Soleth said finally. But my calculations will only be as good as the data you give me. I will build the charges, 17 added. But they will have to be precise. No room for error. Kethvorin stepped forward. And I will map the vents. I know Vreth construction. I can find us a path. Vasquez nodded once. Then let us get to work. The clock is running. The next 16 minutes were the longest of Kethvorin's life. He worked faster than he had ever worked before, pulling information from the base's computer systems, mapping vent pathways, calculating angles and distances. Beside him, 17 assembled charges with hands that never trembled. Soleth sat in a trance, his mind processing numbers that would have taken a computer hours to calculate. And Vasquez moved between them all, coordinating, adjusting, solving problems before they could become disasters. She was everywhere at once, seeing everything, understanding everything. Charges are ready, 17 reported. Placement in the auxiliary vent in 30 seconds. Timing calculated, Soleth added. We have a window of 0.3 seconds. If we miss it, the pressure will kill us. Vent path confirmed, Kethvorin finished. Auxiliary vent 7 connects to a surface opening 800 meters above us. The angle is steep but survivable. The digging sounds grew louder. Rock began to crumble at the blocked entrances. They were out of time. Everyone into the vent, Vasquez ordered. Now, They moved as a unit, climbing into the narrow auxiliary vent that Kethvorin had identified. The passage was tight and hot, barely wide enough for their bodies. 17 wedged himself in last, his crystalline form sealing the entrance behind them. "Pressure release in 30 seconds, Soleth reported. His mental voice was thin with terror. 25, 20. "Charge is armed," 17 confirmed. "We will launch in 3, 2, 1. The world became fire and thunder. Kethvorin felt the pressure wave hit him like the fist of a god. His body was thrown upward through the vent, tumbling and spinning in the superheated air. His suit screamed warnings. His vision went red. He was certain, absolutely certain, that he was about to die. And then, suddenly, he was flying. The vent opened onto the mountainside, and they were ejected into the blood-red sky like seeds from a burning flower. Below them, the mountain began to shake. The geothermal tap had been destroyed by the same pressure release that launched them. Without it, the volcanic energy had nowhere to go. The eruption that followed was spectacular. A column of fire shot up from the mountain, reaching toward the sky like an angry god. The enemy base, the biological weapon, the hundreds of Reth soldiers still inside, all of it was consumed in seconds. The explosion was so bright that Kethvorin could see it through his closed eyes. They fell. The ground rushed up to meet them. But they had been launched at the precise angle, with the precise force, to carry them beyond the immediate blast zone. They hit the rocky ground hard, bouncing and rolling across volcanic stone. Kethvorin lay on his back, staring up at the red sky. Every part of his body hurt. His suit was damaged beyond repair. His shells were cracked in a dozen places. But he was alive, impossible, miraculous, alive. "Team status," Vasquez's voice came over the communication system. Somehow, impossibly, her suit was still functioning. "Sound off." "Alive," Soleth groaned. "Barely. Functional," 17 reported. "Lost 3 more crystal segments. They will regrow." "Alive," Kethvorin managed. "I think." He turned his head and saw Vasquez standing a few meters away. Her suit was scorched and torn. Blood ran from a cut on her forehead. She was the most damaged of all of them, and she was smiling. "Told you," she said. "Incalculable does not mean impossible." The Coalition rescue shuttle arrived 4 hours later. They found the team sitting on a rock outcropping, watching the mountain burn in the distance. The weapon was destroyed. The enemy base was gone. The mission was complete. Against all odds, against all probability, they had survived. 3 weeks later, Kethvorin submitted his mission report to command. It was short. Shorter than any report he had ever written. Mission successful. Bioweapon data transmitted. Facility destroyed. All operatives recovered. The admiral who read the report called him personally. Her compound eyes were wide with disbelief. "Recovered?" She repeated. The mission was classified as one-way. How is this possible? Kethvorin thought about everything he had seen. The thermal vents. The living base. The weapon that could have killed billions. The human who had looked at death and found it interesting. The human found an alternative, he said finally. What alternative? She was given survival odds of 7.2%. She asked for something harder. And then she won. The Admiral was silent for a long moment. I want Private Vasquez transferred to Special Operations. Immediately. With respect, Admiral, I do not think that is a good idea. Why not? Kethvorin remembered to smile. The absolute calm in the face of impossible danger. The refusal to accept any problem as unsolvable. Because Special Operations might not be hard enough for her. In the medical bay, Private Elena Vasquez recovered from her injuries. Her bones were healing. Her burns were fading. She was already reading mission, Briefings for the next operation. She was looking for something harder, because that was what humans did. They looked at the impossible. They smiled, and they found a way through. And somewhere in the galaxy, enemies who had never met a human before were about to learn what that meant, the hard way.